2 hours, so it's not worth it.
I'm very sorry.
In my culture, death is not the end. It's more of a stepping off point. You reach out with both hands and bust, and Sekhmet, bust, and Sekhmet, and Sekhmet, and Sekhmet. They lead you into the green veldt where you can run forever.
That sounds very peaceful.
My father thought so. I am not my father.
T'Challa, task force will decide who brings in Barnes.
Don't bother Miss Romanoff. I'll kill him myself.
The great goddess Sekhmet, the powerful one. This is who I would like to speak with you all about today. But first, a message from our sponsors. Y'all can't read the hieroglyphs. Shut the fuck up. We read them all the time.
Wolof is Kemetic. Wolof is Kemetic. Wolof is Kemetic by nature.
That's a fact. So, family, what I want to do, as I already said, I want us to take a quick look at the goddess Sekhmet. We're going to take a quick look at the goddess Sekhmet from an indigenous African perspective, from an indigenous West African perspective, all right? So I want to say, putting this video together somewhat felt like creating an ode to black women. Discussing the goddess Sekhmet is certainly celebrating the African woman in some regards. What we know is that divine feminine. So really all women, but special dedication to my black women. Shout out to my sisters, you already know what it is. To go.
Just like in ancient Egypt.
A brother like this, who is as good as any guide I've ever dealt with in Egypt, and he's explaining it to us from our own cultural perspective. So we really have a gold mine here. Yes. Make me want to move to Philadelphia.
Thank you. This is as significant as the Sphinx. We're talking about the body of a lion, the head of a pharaoh. We got the body of a woman, the head of a lioness. Wherever you see a king, there is a queen. Wherever you see a queen, there is a king. It's a balanced family. That's why brother was saying we have to reconcile, reconnect the African family. We need to get married, stay married. I don't want to get to it, but you know, we need to have families. We need to have male and female in the house so that the children feel comfortable and then continue that generation. This is where we get it from. And this is no pejorative when you see, you know, woman's breast in Africa is okay. This is life. You know, you're feeding, you know, the children. You breastfeeding is okay. Woman in Africa, out of nowhere, the baby cry, they just breastfeed them. There's nothing, you know, shameful to it. ISIS were doing it, Hathor were doing it, Hatshepsut were doing it. It's the life symbol, the I need to hey.
I have another video where I respond to some of the things the brother here says in his clip. Yet as it concerns the goddess Sekhmet indeed, even as a lioness, she was the wife of Ptah, an embodiment of the motherly and nurturing aspects of the divine feminine, with deities like Mahes, Horus, Nefertim, and even Imhotep described as her sons. Primarily though, these aspects of the goddess were embodied in the form of a divine cow goddess known as Hathor, Het Heru, one of the most ancient and powerful divinities that existed on the Nile River. The house of Hathor was so powerful that her priestesses wielded authority that was comparable to that of a pharaoh. Through her cult, women of the pharaonic societies were able to develop and maintain immense power for generations. Ultimately, like Osiris, it was Hathor who admitted her devotees to a place in heaven she had prepared for them, a patron goddess of femininity, of women, and their children. And yet there was another side to Hathor, a side that embodied all the fierceness and aggressiveness of the lioness. And so this was Sekhmet, and that aggressiveness and that fierceness of the lioness has long been known and venerated, especially on the African continent, her ability to protect against and cause harm to anything that is perceived as a threat too close to home, and thus was it expressed by the ancestors. And so it is said that in the beginning, Ra manifested his own self from out of the noon, and then set out to create the Necharu. He then created the astral beings and celestial bodies, before creating human beings, though it wasn't long before humanity became ungrateful, irreverent, insolent, and violent, cursing the gods, mocking creation, and exploiting one another for petty gain. And so Sekhmet, in her form of Hathor, came down to the earthly plane, pleading as well as she could with the foolish men of earth, except it only made matters worse. Foolish mankind simply mocked the great goddess, although she had come to save their lives and their very souls. They cursed her and attempted to take advantage of the great goddess. Before you know it, Hathor's anger exploded into a burst of flames, and she became the mighty goddess Sekhmet. They attempted to seize her, but she towered over the men and the women, slaughtering them in a violent frenzy, ravaging the entire countryside with no end in sight. It wasn't long before humanity grew desperate and cried out to the gods, but Sekhmet's rage had thrown her into such a frenzy that her bloodthirst only grew stronger and stronger.
Kota, Hoi, explain this to me.
The sun god Ra's heart was heavy at the sight of humanity suffering in the way that it was. After Sekhmet decimated Ra's soldiers, the sun god consulted with his priests, and then they ordered that a potion be concocted. They commanded that the Nile should be flooded with 7,000 barrels of beer, and that this beer was to be mixed with the finest red ochre, so that the Nile would take the appearance of human blood. This was to trick the bloodthirsty goddess by the color and incapacitate her by the power of the alcohol. So they poured it, and when the goddess came for the slaughter, she drank of it deeply, until losing consciousness. Sekhmet had slaughtered such a number in her frenzy that all the earth seemed desolate compared to what it had been before. In her bloodthirst, the Nile waters receded down to only 7 measures. But to the amazement of those watching, out of the receding waters emerged a beautiful bovine goddess. Sekhmet was gone. Heru Hathor had returned, and humanity had been delivered. The mighty companion of the sun god had transformed back into her softer form, and without any memory of the carnage that occurred, and she wept for humanity when she learned the news. Then the goddess raised herself to the skies, taking back her rightful place in the heavens. It's easy to think that the ancient Egyptian quote-unquote flood story gave rise to the Hebraic flood story, but most academics give that credit to Mesopotamia and stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh. However, make no mistake, we can detect the likely influences of several motifs like the blood-red waters, the parting of seas, and etc. all throughout the biblical narrative.
You long enough. This must now be finished.
No, Ramesses. It is only beginning.
Nubians and Kushites practiced the cult of Hathor Sekhmet in Egypt and outside of Egypt, all the way up until the Middle Ages. The Beja are also said to have venerated deities like Isis and Bastet well into the African Middle Ages as well. Now, ancient Egyptian influence within Hebraic culture is somewhat expected. Egyptian influence in the Mediterranean and the Near East, that's expected. And although it shows a clear bias, Egyptian influence, relation, or even similarity is much less expected in other parts of Africa, even in the Northeast and the greater Eastern African region, although history shows clear connections. And while people may have their opinion, around here we like to double down on the facts. So allow me to take you guys on a journey. We're taking a flight straight to West Africa, where most people haven't even looked and least expect. We're going straight from the Kemetic Empire on the Nile to that great empire of Mali on the sacred and mysterious Niger River.
mulo kera.
Binda rodidla.
Yiruka.
Keita. Niye mafle inadon.
Iborami.
Wakal. Nyadon etiye donde. Koma barina.
Yoro jumelo.
Dunia damna na yende. Wakati jam otibikoye. Yede fana dondo. Ibonson ibembache. Wula kido. Kachau bemara.
Ne bembache. Mbembache jume.
Ibembache juma. Ibembache magan konfata konate.
Mabo. Oui. Mabo. Oui.
In this short clip from an old film about the epic of Sundiatta, the story begins where Sekhmet, Hathor, the lioness cow goddess, is ravaging the countryside, exterminating all the soldiers sent out by the king, after she had gone completely out of control. In the sacred Malian text, but especially in this film excerpt, the cow goddess on the Nile manifests as a buffalo goddess on the Niger River. And instead of literal transformation into a bloodthirsty lioness, the buffalo goddess retains all of the rage and violence embodied by the lioness Sekhmet. And I want to say that we shouldn't really expect the same exact myth from region to region for various reasons. Even in ancient Kemet, the mythology centered around several deities varied on certain points, while maintaining a generally homogeneous literary corpus. And also, we should note that such direct reference to the old ways is yet much too taboo for the social climate of the Sahel, post-independence until now. Sahelian epics are highly codified, so let's pay attention to some of these details.
Lidu, sikatala. Untuk ni kata kama sirila, alul jati, mimi sikande mekan torong keleng kele. Kani keleng ya, tu, sekuja lele. Ambanyuma ini bara, atau ambil demi bi segala bo.
Ati makabondara, taka demi nife.
Notice how the hunters approach the goddess with such deference. She's being approached like a goddess on purpose. Referring to her as mother in this particular context suggests that these hunters are intercessors or even devotees.
Atinde ntabaye.
Atongi wilamba nyuma ayama jige anga bone doron le bisema.
Kambunya wa. Amsaka munyani. Abora mi.
Ambura mandene. Ba, uche ambura mandene.
Munyase.
So kumuru fly kindi galada. Mandenji kuma imina iki sansuma. Ma, siramina kindi galada.
Okay, let's bring that back. Let's bring that back. Just in case you didn't notice. Just in case you didn't notice. Note the offerings of meat and of beer. An enormous jug which the hunters note is from the great Mande standard. This is essentially the same exact potent solution given to Sekhmet, especially since our hunters knew exactly who it was they were coming to face.
Chantewa. Nidu kabisa. Ifembelo.
And again, although she's not depicted as a lioness outright, this is captured in her aggressiveness and her reverence for these two male hunters, as well as their offering. This is also captured by the staggering body count, which we learn she has amassed on her blood-spilling rage through the countryside. Despite all of this, the offerings are still able to appease the goddess, if even just for a moment.
asa kutimina abna sigifa tronkeli nkoro di do samu abna abunya aba fai kwati fui fe fodo muso kelen tron abna jamna tukune no muso furu balu be labo abi kelen tawla bela chijugu ne kala monti atoko le Sogolon abna denke wulu imna wuli ka jamna be mara edeni ikafari uwa mi ko dala o kofe kene kala fara ne fambi uta sini na yon kumbe ibitelia ka mbosion saba mfari bebi yere mbagwe pensa wa mi bulu mawotma kumba muna abikilin fle kofe sisa aya kandi
Ayang kwa kandi ma.
ndeu ata ala ka udeme
Muna otise kamnen filionya fe fo kofe.
Akakanga ketene. Loko ye kabakuru fili. Kabakuru fili ni kɛra kuruba ye k'olu yɛrɛ sɔrɔ o sanfɛ. Tɔrɔn kelen tora duguma.
Ai fatili.
O ma fanin de yɛlɛmana ka kɛ baba ye min fanin bi kɔgɔbɔgɔ la. Tɔrɔn kelen nani curo o kɔnɔ. Se ka ba fɔ a tɛ se ka na ɲa. Yɔrɔ la kana yɛlɛma ka kɛ mandi.
Asarawa.
Abo, ni saya ti fila ye, kelen kɔni kɛra.
Imba wasa. Sisan, an bɛ barika la ye k'i waleɲuman dɔn ani ka sira ɲini fɛ ka segin mande.
K'a ɲuman dɔn.
So here comes into play this African idea of consubstantiality. The idea that the same energy or the same force can manifest itself in different forms yet maintain pretty much the same identity. And this helps to give stories and characters a lot of flexibility and also allows for these important messages to be communicated in various contexts.
amatali auka au mira
Sogolon i b'a kɛ saya sababuya ma bɔ an na an kɛra dɛmɛbagaw de ye.
Dokamiso, the buffalo goddess, is the same character as Sogolon. Although Dokamiso points the hunters to Sogolon, Sogolon only appears after Dokamiso, the buffalo goddess, dies because she is in essence Dokamiso. Within the various nomes of Kemet, where each shrine may have shown varying emphasis on the divine nature of the goddess, and at various periods of the religious history of Egypt, Hathor was considered the mother of Horus, the rightful king. And in the later periods, Hathor was increasingly associated and interchanged with Isis, and we can see these marks of religious and literary development from late period Egypt reflected within the sacred myths of Mali.
Il faut qu'il y ait un des massas.
Si moi, il y a l'amener. Si moi, il y a quoi faire en fait, mon déconner. Akadia.
La cabane de mou là où fait. Non, non, des fous. Non, des signes fama. Aywa. Nami ka uma basie. Ete me bradi. Betanga serafi.
Mon bila.
Sundiatta école la tuguni. Maître Dimina.
You can correct that, eh? You can't in fle. Sankolola. Ntanalu. Nyen kandama. Abina akili tuira.
Tiens-le.
Tiens-le.
The child Heru is always destined for greatness, but he has many obstacles to pass before he can achieve success. So in the ancient sources, Plutarch informs us of the following.
Likewise, when Sutekh impeached Heru for being a bastard, Hermes became his advocate, and Heru was judged legitimate by all the gods. After this, they say that Sutekh was worsted in 2 of several battles. Isis also had Harpokrates by Osiris, who accompanied with her after his decease. And so it was that Harpokrates had come into the world before his time, and was lame in his lower parts.
So just as there are several versions of Hathor, there are also several versions of Heru, which all belong to a common corpus. Haruwith, or Heru the Elder, is one of the oldest attested deities of Kemet, predating even Osiris, and this one, for instance, is never described with infirmity. Heru in the form of Khered, or Harpokrates in Greek, was however described as lame in his legs. The title of Horus as Khered is attested since the Pyramid text in the Old Kingdom, while mention of him being infirm doesn't appear until the Greco-Roman era. It's still, however, pretty hard to buy the idea that it was purely a Greek invention. Iconography of that cult from that period, however, could be used to say that the Greco-Roman world definitely took a particular liking to the cult of Harpokrates. Heru the child, as a version of Heru, is related to all the other iterations of the god Horus or Heru, such as Horem Akhet or even the Greek Hercules to an extent. He is the embodiment of the righteous heir, or of destiny and power, the victorious sun in the morning.
Sogolon ne perdait pas espoir. Elle se battait pour son fils. Qui sont ses enfants? D'autres enfants sont nés. Puisque nous avons passé 10 ans, il y a la petite Kanko, le deuxième enfant de Sogolon. Il y a Namboukari, le garçon. Il est né pour être le bras droit de Sundiatta.
C'est donc le 3e enfant de Sogolon?
Non, puisque je te dis que sa mère est morte.
Ah bon? Quand ça?
C'est compliqué. Le roi avait marié une femme qui est morte. On a confié son enfant à Sogolon pour être le bras droit de Sundiatta.
Ah, tiens, ton histoire là, je ne comprends rien.
As stated earlier, these West African and Sahelian myths are unsuspectingly highly codified. There are different versions with varying emphases according to location and content. We're lucky, however, to be able to review the ancient sources that are available. Plutarch reminds us of the following.
Eudoxus also saith that the Egyptians fable of Harpokrates, or Jupiter, how being once unable to go, because his legs grew together, he, for very shame, spent all his time in the wilderness. But that Isis dividing and separating these parts of his body, he came to have the right use of his feet. This fable also hints to us by these words that the intelligence and discourse of the god, which walked before in the unseen and inconspicuous state, came into generation by means of motion.
Amen.
No one knows the limits a mother will cross for the love of her child. And although Sogolon had kept her faith and devotion, she began to feel despair, though she never truly quite lost hope.
Kana kasi.
Attila! Attila! Domba sina Sundiatta. Iwili kijo. Chiki ten, Sogolon ten. Baji bisa anu ko abo mugola. Gatisa kuma ju ko de. Wili ki kan labo je ka do musafura nana. Manimuri. Ndani bila.
After this, Osiris, coming out of the netherworld to assist his son Heru, first labored and trained him up in the discipline of war, and then questioned him what he thought to be the most honorable thing a man could do, to which he soon replied, to avenge one's father and mother's quarrel when they suffer injustice. Which when Osiris heard, he was very much pleased with him, looking upon him now as sufficiently instructed for a soldier.
Sogolon. Iba fe iden ke troma. Ibita jona ke sunsumberen kari. Wodama wode ba dem ke troma.
Indeed, the great god Osiris returns from the dead, only to impart his son with the tools and wisdom necessary for victory and the re-establishment of Ma'at. Here the great Khered manifests as a mysterious, bearded, elderly Danso hunter in his white ceremonial garb, with his flail or fly swatter and his staff which he offered Heru Sundiatta. Danso hunters represent a fraternity and a traditional wisdom house from ancient Mali, so it's really interesting for us to see an allusion to this Osirian principle within this context. In the end, Sundiatta elevates his mother beyond the rank of those who even dared belittle her in the past. After his father's passing, Sundiatta restores the land, vanquishing his father's enemies, and establishes the dominance of the great Mali Empire over the entire region. So although there are some minor divergences, we can clearly note the similarities between this sacred epic of Sogolon Conde, the buffalo goddess, and Sundiatta, with the combination of the myth of the heavenly cow and the myth of Harpokrates. The myth of the heavenly cow teaches many lessons. One, that nature is much more powerful than our human capabilities. To curse the gods is to take the benefits of nature and life for granted, leading to all manner of perversions. The myth of the heavenly cow itself centers around the idea that not only should women be considered as having a capacity for maximum effect, but that the uncontrollable force that Ra had unleashed upon humanity in the form of the violent Sekhmet was too much for this world to handle, an issue which, interestingly, was resolved only by a scientific, if not chemical, approach, rather than an all-powerful decree washing away all of our problems. And ultimately, as impressive as the scale of violence was, it did not solve the problem that had arose in the hearts of men. And so thus it was that Osiris, the great Necher, inherited the throne of Ra, came down to earth and delivered humanity from its plight, before himself passing on due to a betrayal, leaving his son the righteous rule over earth. And so it seems, man must eradicate evil from himself, yet with a little inspiration from the gods and some self-determination, humanity can establish Ma'at in long-lasting peace and order, harmony, and prosperity. We can see these principles at play today. The mighty Mali Empire, once of great legend, was born again in a new time, once crippled by the great crimes of slavery and colonization, but is now again standing tall for one and all to see, and against all odds, while expelling the Setian forces of chaos. We're going to drop our shade of that. But what about you guys? I'm curious to know your thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, Sekhmet manifesting on the Niger in her name of Sogolon shows clear cultural ties and continuity with ancient Kemet. But why isn't this more known? Is this being kept a secret, or are people just not connecting the dots? What did you guys get out of this? What insights might you have? Did you notice any similarities elsewhere within the other mythologies? Are we those ungrateful people today? What disasters loom over us if so? How do we become better people? Do we have the will to be victorious despite any of our individual or collective conditions? Or we let our enemies and the forces of hate, corruption, and scarcity rule over us? Any questions or comments, folks, please drop in the comments. Please drop in the comments. Stay tuned for more next time. Sekhmet Rising Part 2 in the chamber right now. Y'all let me know. Kemway, that's all the way, all day, every day. Hit the notification button so that you don't miss out. Peace, love, and black power. Show somebody some love today. That's up.
Hey, ne bon son lui.
Ne te mettons là, donc.
Jeliba bemi.
Jeliba.
Do soche. Aka kan jamu koko fonyana.
Atara. Jeliba yoroke janyana. Now, angewa.
Soche. Comme Jeliba Tara. Ibnanga kuma tofonana.
Nete se. Nete Jelie. Uteneka barai. Isona. Ibe Jeli chama ye kasiraka. Olu siki jamu korofo ye.
Ekon, imankan katulu. Ikaka kan deme. Iyo lo fo Jeliba ye.